Chapter 10. Are you sure about this, Geisy? My mother asked. Positive. I'm not sure it's really you, she said reluctantly. I don't care. I said, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for Fenimore. I don't want him to have to bear it alone. That's awfully nice of you, Honey Bunch. You must really care about him, huh? When I first laid eyes on him, I'd been completely convinced that he and I would never be friends. But now I was ready to cut off all my hair just to make him feel better. I guess she was right. I did care about Fenimore. Go ahead, I said to my mother. Do your worst. She pinned a towel around my neck and went to work on me. A half hour later, I reached up and my hand over my head. It felt like a muskrat fur. Not that I've ever petted an actual muskrat before. What do you think? I asked my mother. Well, to be frank, it's going to take some getting used to, she said. I think I would have preferred to hear something more along the lines of, you look cute as button too. But when I looked at myself in the mirror, I had to agree with her. It was going to take some getting used to. That night, as I went to sleep, I tried to imagine the look on Fenimore's face when he saw what I had done for him. The next day was Saturday. As soon as I was up and dressed, I hopped on my bike and I went over to Fenimore's house. I couldn't wait to show him my hair. As I rode up the driveway, I heard a basketball bouncing behind the garage. Figuring it was Fenimore, I headed around the back. The boy bouncing the ball wasn't Fenimore at all. He was tall, with a head full of dark curly hair and a sharp look to his face that immediately put me on edge. Who are you? I asked. Who are you? He shot back. I'm Fenimore's friend, Guy, I said. Well, I'm his best friend, George, he said. He had the same kind of twangy accent as Fenimore. Where's Fenimore? I asked. Inside finishing breakfast. I flew up here yesterday to surprise him. Boy, was he glad to see me. Fenimore came out. Hey, what are you doing here? He asked. Sheesh, what the heck happened to your hair? Lucy got scalped, same as you, Fen. George cackled and he spat in the grass. Really, Guy, what's with your hair? Fenimore said again. You look worse than I do. Why did you let her do that? I just thought, well, maybe it would help. The only thing that's going to help you now is a bag over your head, George cackled and spat in the grass again. Hey, wait a minute. Is this the kid whose mama skinned you, Fen? The same one you told me ran around showing his bare butt at class picnic or something? I did not, I shouted. That's how I heard it, said George. Come on, Fenimore, let's get out of here. This kid's giving me the creeps. Besides, his mom might be right behind him with her shears, and I don't want to lose my hair, too. Guy, you really shouldn't have done it, Fenimore said. Yeah, no kidding, added George. I did it for you, Fenimore, I said, to show we're friends. Some friend, George sneered. You really shouldn't have done it, Fenimore said again, looking at me, shaking his head. Okay, I got the message. I wasn't about to hang around here any longer. Getting dumped on, it wasn't my fault Fenimore would rather have a best friend who spit and cackled like a goose than one who would sacrifice his own head of hair for him. Some great plan I had come up with. I ran and got on my bike and pedaled home as fast as I could. I hated that stupid George from Pigeon Forge, and I hated Fenimore too for not understanding that a person who would do what I'd done for him was the kind of person who anybody ought to realize would make a great friend. My mother was in the kitchen cutting up cheese when I got home. So what did Fenimore say about your haircut? She asked. I bet he was impressed. Oh yeah, impressed with what a jerk I am. Well, I'm sure he'll come around. I think it was very noble of you. Mom, can I ask you something? I asked. Ask away, she said. What does the apple doesn't fall far from the tree mean? It means that people tend to be like their parents. An apple tree produces apples. The parents are the trees and their children are the apples they produce. Get it? I got it all right. What it meant was that no matter what I did, people were always going to judge me by the tree I'd fallen out of, just like Fenimore had done. Geisy, which do you think is more festive, white cheese or yellow cheese? My mother asked. Why did my tree have to be so weird? Why did my mother have to ask questions about cheese? How was anyone supposed to ever be able to see who I really was? How was I even supposed to know who I was? Maybe I was really weird and just didn't know it. Oh, by the way, my mother said, Mrs. Adams called a little while ago. It seems they got a house guest this weekend. George, I think she said his name was. Anyway, he'll be joining us for dinner tomorrow night. I'd forgotten all about the dinner. Maybe if we had Fenimore coming in on his own, he would have found a way to talk. I could have convinced him that I wasn't a nut like my parents and that he ought to give me another chance. But with George there making fun of me, things between Fenimore and me just were going to get worse. This is going to be so much fun, my mother said, happily chopping away. Assorted cheeses and new friends. What could be more perfect? I just looked at her and sighed. I knew there was no point in even trying to explain how much I wished at that moment that my apple had fallen 1,000,000 miles away from her tree. Chapter 11. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock on the dot. Come in, come in. You're right on time. Let's let the party begin, my mom sang to her company. Guy, company's here. I came out of my room and stood at the top of the stairs looking down. When I saw what my mother was wearing, I could have kicked myself for not thinking to check on her beforehand. She had on one of her, what she calls the hostess with the mostest outfits. This one was particularly bizarre. She was wearing a skirt made out of pot holders she'd sewn together. The matching blouse had red flames painted on the front and wooden kitchen matches hot glued to the back that spilled out too hot to handle. My father was wearing his usual too short pants, white socks and loafers, and a shirt that matched my mother's on the back of his. The matches spelled out, "Light my fire." I saw George poke Fenimore in the ribs and point at my father's socks when his back was turned. Fenimore whispered something in George's ear, and they both laughed. "Why don't you two boys run upstairs and find Geisy?" my mother suggested. "Yeah," said George, "let's go find Geisy." Quickly, I went back to my room and grabbed a book so they wouldn't know I'd been standing out there and watching them. "Hey," said Fenimore when they reached my door, "your mom said we should come find you." "Here I am. I was just reading," I said. "Shall we tell Geisy his book's upside down?" George said to Fenimore, giving him another one of those pokes in the ribs. I blushed and put the book on the nightstand beside my bed. There's only one chair in my room, and it's one of those rolling desk chairs. George sat down in it, leaned back, and put his feet up on my desk. "You know who talks about you all the time, Finn?" George said, ignoring me as though I wasn't even in the room. "Janice Greenhut." "No way," said Fenimore. "Who's Janice Greenhut?" I asked, figuring I might as well try to join the conversation. "Some girl you don't know," George said dismissively. "Anyway, she's pining for you big time, Finn, I swear. Remember that Valentine she sent you last year?" "That was gross," Fenimore said. "Be mine, sweet Valentine, and I shall be thine," they recited in unison. Then they both laughed and pretended to gag. "Oh, remember Kyle Kibble?" George went on. "He broke his ankle skateboarding, and now he's got pins in it. He can put refrigerator magnets right on the skin, and they stick to him." "I never broke a bone," I said, making an attempt to join the conversation. "But I know this kid, Bubba Smith, who got a peanut stuck up his nose and had to go to the hospital to have it taken out." "Really?" Fenimore said. "So what?" George jumped in, grabbing Fenimore's attention back with both hands. "Remember that time we went to the ball game and we saw that guy hurling over the railing onto the hot dog vendor?" Another fit of laughter as Fenimore and his best friend George from Pigeon Forge recalled yet another wonderful, perfect, terrific time they had spent together. I gave up trying to be a part of the conversation. They didn't seem to notice. For the next 45 minutes, they talked about people I didn't know and events I hadn't been a part of. Might as well have been a dust bunny under my bed for all they cared. My mother called us down to dinner, and I kind of wanted to sit down by Fenimore, but George elbowed me out of the way and plopped himself down next to him. They whispered and giggled together through the whole meal. I'm not even going to go into the gory details of what the fondue was like. Let's just say that festive and interactive didn't begin to describe it. Lumpy and disgusting is a lot closer. And when it was finally over and they'd all gone home, I was in as foul mood as I'd ever been in. "I like your friend Fenimore," my father said as he scrubbed a plate and handed it to my mother to dry. "In case you didn't notice, he's not my friend," I said. "He's George's." "Well, I think the two of you look pretty doggone adorable with those matching buzz cuts. I have to say, guys, yours is growing on me," my mother said, obviously trying to cheer me up. I grunted and rolled my eyes. "I have a feeling what Guy's hoping is that it will grow on him," my father said. "Sooner the better, am I right, Guy Chick?" I nodded glumly. I couldn't believe I'd cut off my hair for what? Fenimore could care less about being friends with me. Why should he, when he and George had so much in common? "You were pretty quiet tonight," my mother said as she put away the stack of plates she'd just dried. "Are you and Fenimore still working things out?" "Mom, leave it alone, will you? There's nothing for Fenimore and me to work out, okay? He hates me, the end." I sat down at the kitchen table and rested my head on my arms. "Why do you say that, Geisy?" my mother asked, putting down her dish towel and coming over to sit beside me. "You two will work it out. After all, he came to dinner here tonight. That's got to mean something, right?" "Yeah, he came to dinner with his best friend, and they both ignored and insulted me all night. That's got to mean something too, doesn't it?" "Social triangles can be deadly," my mother said, giving me my knee a little pat. "But tomorrow, George goes back to Pigeon Forge, and you'll have Fenimore all to yourself again. The two of you will be like two peas in a pod, which reminds me, tomorrow is our first costume fitting for the play, so I'll be coming to school in the morning." Could my life get any worse? Fenimore hated my guts. Kevin Brudhauser was going to go nuts when he got a load of my haircut, and now on top of that, I could look forward to my mother being on display in front of the whole class. "Why me?" I muttered as I got up and headed to my room. "Why me?"